Hey guys, it's Alison Heikkila. Thank you so much for joining me. This is part 2 of my Swatch with Me video. I wasn't planning on making a part 2, but I realized after I had filmed it and published it that there were a couple of things that I had left out. And then I had gotten a number of questions from a few viewers, and I said, you know what? It's just better, instead of individually answering questions, there might be other folks that had questions that didn't necessarily ask them. I thought it was just better to film a part 2 and kind of go through some of the things that I had forgotten or missed, and then answer all of the questions that I had gotten, or at least I hope to answer all of the questions I had gotten. I wrote a few down. We're not going to be making a project today. I'm not going to actually be doing any swatching. And if you did not see part 1, I'll have that linked in the video description below. Please make sure that you expand the description box, and then you'll be able to see that link as well as any other pertinent links that I have. And if you didn't see part 1, go back and watch that first, because I cover a whole lot of things about swatching, but apparently not everything. I mean, can anybody actually cover all the things? Probably not, but I'm going to do my best to cover all of the things that I do for swatching, since I had missed a few things. So first of all, I had forgotten to show you guys my alcohol ink tags. And I thought that this was important because I didn't use any fancy dies for this. I just cut squares. You can use dies if you want to, but I know that some of you may not be using a die cut machine at home. And perhaps, you thought, well, Alison's using these tags. I don't have a die cut machine. I don't have a tag die. You don't have to. You can just cut squares or whatever. I made them a good size so that I can get a good range of color variation. What I had done is I used Jot poster board paper, because this is typically the substrate that I use when I'm working with alcohol inks. These are available from Dollar Tree. They're really inexpensive. I personally prefer this over Yupo because you have a bit more control. Yupo, which is a plastic paper. It's not really paper, but we're going to just call it paper. It's plastic. A lot of times you make something that looks really cool, but the Yupo continues to move that ink on you unless you quickly dry it with like a heat tool. And I don't love how uncontrollable it can be for me sometimes. Other people do great jobs with it, and that's fantastic. But for me, it's a little too uncontrolled. So the poster board paper is just the right amount of control and lack of control. And I love that. So I dropped a couple of whatever color it is, this is watermelon, onto my poster board paper. And then I used my blower tool to kind of move it around so that you can see that there's some dark areas, there's some light areas, and get some nice looking variation. So that's why the swatches are the size that they are. And that's why you can see all of these different colors, shades, because I wanted concentrated in some areas and then wispy in others so that I can see just how pale they kind of get. So that's what I did there. And again, I labeled them all on the back. So those are my alcohol ink swatches. You can see I just used one of these little rings again, and I keep them with my alcohol inks. They're right in the same little drawer that I have all of my inks. Okay, so let's cover the questions that I had seen. One of my viewers, Kathy, she had asked a number of questions in her comment, and I thought they were really excellent questions. So thank you, Kathy, for asking them. So one of her questions was, how do you apply the ink to the tags? Do you swipe? Do you use a blending brush? And if so, how do you keep the colors true? Well, first, let me say I don't use a blending brush. For these, I swiped with every one of them. These are my alcohol inks, my distress inks and my distress oxides. And I swipe the inks on the top and the oxides on the bottom. And the reason that I swiped as opposed to doing another method is because I, more often than not, am swiping my color. So if you're watching my channel, you probably have seen some of my other videos, and you'll know that I like to add color around the edges of my card bases, and sometimes I just add color randomly by swiping and whatever. So the point is that I think that it's important for you to apply whatever medium you're using in the way that you tend to use it most. And if you use it a couple of ways, consider maybe swatching all of those ways, right? So for this, for example, I swipe because I do swipe, right? And then I dropped, it's hard to see it on this one. Here you can see I dropped some water on here to see how it reacts, how the colors change and shift, okay? So this is how I tend to apply these ink colors and oxide colors. So it makes sense for me to apply them to my swatch in that manner because it gives me the truest showing of what the color or medium is going to look like because it's already how I use it. I don't really stamp with distress inks, but when they first came out, now this is a really old swatch sheet, okay, because you can see here that it's only got speckled egg and crackling campfire. None of the other new colors are on here, but I stamped them. I took a solid stamp. This is a bat because, you know, I love bats. And I inked each one and stamped them just so that I had a quick at a glance look at all of the colors. But because I don't ever really stamp, actually, no, I never stamp with distress ink. It's just not my favorite to stamp with. I use it for other techniques, just like I'm sure many of you do. I don't really reference this because I have this now, but it is helpful to have kind of an at a glance if you want to. And I do think that stamping out your inks, and I don't just mean distress inks, I mean any of them, is helpful if that's how you use them. So I either use this bat, and I happen to have this adorable stamp of a stamp, and I use this a lot too. And I like this one in particular because it's got solid areas, but then it has this crisp line here, and then it's got these tiny detail stamps or images of 2 stars and a heart, and it allows me to see exactly how the ink works. So is it wicking? Is it giving me a crisp image? Is it bleeding? You know, all of that stuff just on this stamp. And you might be like, wow, you're really reading into this pretty heavily, huh? It's just a swatch. But to me, it's not just a swatch. This is my job. This is what I am passionate about. So having, you know, thinking about all the details is really important to me. And if I'm going to spend time swatching, I want them to give me as much information as possible. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So that's one of the reasons that I chose this stamp. Also, it's just adorable. This was from my store. It's from Great American Stamp. I don't even know if this company is still in business. If you like this stamp, you can take a look. I have no idea. But that's why I chose this, because it has a lot of information that it can give me all on this one little stamp. And it's not too big. It fits in little squares, and I can show you how I've used them. To go back to Kathy's question, do I use a blending brush? And if so, how do you keep the colors true? I don't use a blending brush when I'm swatching, but if I were to, I would probably go with like the mini ink blending foams because I have one for each of the colors that I have. Although I tend to use those only for my oxides now. But yeah, you're right. How would you keep the colors true? You'd have to clean the brush each and every time. So that's why I don't like to do that, because I want them to stay true. Okay, so this is not complete, obviously, but I had downloaded this from the Imagine website many years ago. I don't really update it as I should, but I really should get back to that. But it gives you, you know, all the different lines that Imagine offers. So I just fill it in. And here you can see, you know, how I've used that little stamp of a stamp. You could see my green. So this is nice because quickly at a glance, I needed to re-ink these. So they're not really accurate. But at a glance, I can see like, okay, I have a lot of olivey greens. I have a number of bluish greens. What am I missing? You know, whatever. And then I can label them all here. So it's a nice way to swatch things, but I don't tend to use this because it's really quite big, because there's just so many colors and mediums and all of that. So I find it to be a little easier for me to have individual swatches per medium. But if I'm shopping with Imagine, I can say, okay, what am I missing? You know, and you can see that I've got them laid out so that, okay, I know I don't have lilac posies. I know I don't have Lulu lavender in regular Memento ink. So those are colors that I might want to fill in and purchase. So you've got to do it how it works for you. Everybody works a little bit different. This is a good option. It takes up a lot of cardstock, but I liked it at the time. I don't really utilize it anymore. I should, because I need to get some inks, but that's another thing. I'm just moving that off to the side. So Kathy had also asked, what do I think about using a stamp to swatch with? And again, I think it's great if you're using the stamp to swatch the inks that you stamp with. So the Distress inks are not really what I stamp with, but I wanted an at-a-glance sheet at the time. So it was helpful for me to have this, even though I don't stamp with Distress inks. But if you have an ink line that you stamp with a lot, yeah, totally. But keep in mind, it's really helpful to have, at the very least, a solid image, like a silhouette. And then if you can have little details like this, that makes it even better. Okay, another thing, it's super helpful to have your swatches with your products, either if you're storing them in your crafting space or your studio space, or with the item itself. So in here, I have all of my memento markers just in this one pouch. And what I do is I store my swatches. And again, I've got index cards. And these are all, you can see how old they are. I like spilled something on it. They're well-loved swatches because these markers are old. You can see that I've got them all broken down by the families that they came in, because you can get them individually or in packs of 4. So I just broke them down by the families, and that's it. So I keep them with this because I don't always craft in my craft space or my studio space. Sometimes I'll take my markers to my mom's, or sometimes I'll just go outside or in a different part of the house, whatever. So having my swatches with my mediums is really helpful. Now, obviously, you know, I'm not going to be carrying my whole drawer of Distress inks. This is how I keep my Distress inks. They're in this, right? But they're close. They're right nearby, because I'm not going to be toting my inks anywhere. But my markers I bring, so I have swatches that live with the markers. Okay. Something else that I had mentioned the other day was my embossing powders. So I took some time years and years ago when I had first gotten these sets from Stampendous. These are really, I don't even know if any of these are available anywhere. There are similar, like, off-brand collections, I believe at Michael's, that come in these like packs of 5. So what I had done was I took an embossing ink dauber. It has like, it's embossing ink in a bottle, and it has like a sponge at the top, kind of like these sheer shimmer sticks, like this, but it's bigger, right? And obviously there's no sheer shimmer in it. It's embossing ink, and I used it to create these circles. But if you have the Versamarker, you can do that too. Just create a little blob or a swash or whatever. And then for the glittery ones and for these micas, what I did was I took Tear-It tape, which is also from Imagine, and I just applied a little bit of that, applied the powder, heat set, and that was it. The micas don't have any embossing powder in it, so it's just flakes. So you just apply them right to the tape and it sticks. Same with this shaved ice. So that was super helpful, but now I can see at a glance each of the collections that I have, and it doesn't matter that if you don't have these collections, whatever, you can categorize them however. You could do your whites together, you could do your golds together. Again, work with how you prefer to work, but this one is this here. So you can see exactly how they look, because this shabby blue, oh, I'm obsessed with those shabbies, is this guy. Looks very different in powder form than it does when it's melted. And that, my friends, is exactly why we swatch. Okay, so that's another option. And also I had mentioned that, you know, with the large bottles, I apply it right to the top. Okay, so that's just another way, but I like having multiple ways to check out my swatches. I'm trying not to be long-winded here, and I apologize if I am, but there's just a lot of information to cover. But you can see I use that dauber tool for all of these to get these all broken out. And you could see how, you know, clear turquoise is pretty close to Pacific blue, Do you need both? It depends. Are you buying them individually or in a kit? Here I can see I have Rubellite in 2 different kits. You know, I can compare all of the gold at a glance instead of trying to decipher what it looks like in the bottle. So it's really helpful to have these. Also, are you into layering stamps or layering stencils? This is super helpful to do also. I had taken an Altenew stamp set and a bunch of different ink colors, Versacolor, Mementos. This is old, so there's no VersaFine Clairs here. They weren't even in existence yet, but I think that these are mostly Memento and Versamagic and Versacolor. Yeah, I think that that's pretty much it. But I labeled each one. You could do it neater if you want to, but it's just for me, so I didn't care if I just quickly hand wrote it. But it tells you how your colors work together. Like, this is totally weird, but I love it. Like, would you think to do gray flannel, teal, zeal, nautical blue, and elderberry together? Maybe not, but look at how cool that looks. And using it with the same flower or leaf over and over again really gives you an idea of how things look better or worse or whatever. Like, I thought this was going to be awesome, and I don't like it. I'm not a fan. This one is not as nice as this one, in my opinion. I prefer this color combination to this one. So it's really nice to have swatches of how you stack your layering colors on a stamp or a stencil, because then you can say, oh, you know what, this combination really worked, or this is okay, but how can we tweak it to make it a little bit better, right? So that's another suggestion for you. Do I have anything else that I need to go over? My gosh, this was longer than I had anticipated, but I think that that's pretty much it. If you do have any questions, please let me know in the comments and I will answer you personally. I don't plan on making a 3rd video because I think that I covered pretty much everything. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful to you. Again, if you didn't watch the first video, I encourage you to watch it. I know that this is a lot of talk about color theory and kind of things that are not important to some folks, but this stuff is important to me. So I hope it's helped you, and I hope that you start swatching if you haven't already. So I will see you all very soon. Be well, stay safe, peace out.